Hello everyone, welcome to this Sport for Life UK podcast. My name is Tom Clark-Forrest. I'm the founder and CEO here at Sport for Life. I'm joined today by our new Chair of Trustees, Mike Gahir, who joined us on the 1st of April this year. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Tom.
Just going to go through a few things around Mike's background, the trustee role, and then delve into a few things around Sport for Life, the sector, and young people. So just wanted to kickstart, Mike, if that's right, by just if you can tell us a little bit about your background, please.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to speak with you today. So if I kind of look, I was born down in Essex and moved up to Midlands in sort of 2007, and kind of took to the region almost immediately, really. And this has been my home, sort of ever since. If I look at, my work experience, it's heavily finance and business, led. I worked for a lot of the major banks. I've worked for some advisory firms, global advisory firms in corporate finance, and I've worked in industry as well, which is kind of where I work, at the moment. But what I would say is that that over the course of time, what's been very, very consistent, irrespective of where I've worked, is that I've been involved with working with charities, giving my time, in my own time, really, outside of work, and working with young people specifically. So, for example, for some of the larger organisations that I've worked with, I've been heavily involved in their graduate recruitment programs, been a mentor to young people starting their careers. Outside of that, I've worked as a mentor, for various university programs, and still continue to do that. And so really helping young people has been pretty synonymous with everything that I've done right the way through my career.
Yeah, sounds great, and clearly a lot of relevant experience. And can you tell us how more recently you came to be involved with Sport for Life?
So when I discovered Sport for Life, the work which Sport for Life has done, is doing, completely resonated with me. So the reason it resonated with me was because of all of my previous involvements with young people. And here is a charity in the Midlands, in Birmingham specifically, that's close to my heart, doing great work with young people. That combination for me was absolutely perfect. And having looked at any number of charities that I could have given my time for, for me to make a choice of where I want to give my time, that the purpose has to hit me in my heart, really, more than anything else. And this did, and therefore I was more than happy to kind of throw my hat into the ring and say that I would love to be the chair of this organisation because of the great work it does. So there's a very, very personal feeling for me, being involved with Sport for Life.
Brilliant. And here we are talking now as the Chair of Trustees, which is great. And you talked there about purpose and kind of alignment.
Yeah.
Tell me how you feel that your personal values align to the values of Sport for Life, but also your passion for sport and what sport means to you as well.
Yeah, and I think, if I look at the kind of the Sport for Life values as I know them, in terms of changing the lives of young people, being a team, delivering quality right the way through every piece of work that the organisation does, and a relentless focus on changing, continuing to grow. The Sport for Life has got a really, really proud history, from nothing to what it is now. That's a tremendous story, and there's not a single person or anybody I've spoken to at all since I've been here in my short time that doesn't feel that actually just wants to just keep doing more. There is nothing that's enough, right now, and that is exactly what the game is, because actually our purpose in Sport for Life doesn't actually finish. So for me personally, and my values, given what I've just said about helping young people, as a general principle, I like to help other people. I've got a real passion to share knowledge, and that if that can make somebody else's life better, then that's a great purpose served, because knowledge kept to yourself is just wasted. If we don't share and make the world a better place, then actually what is the purpose of having that knowledge? Yeah. So helping others is a massive part of how I live my life. And the other part that resonates with me and my personal values is just around challenging, and just having a curiosity to be better, to not change for change's sake, but actually, and being a little bit analytical, being a bit critical, and being progressive. I've got a real, I suppose, theory, worry, however you want to kind of phrase it, but the whole ability to, for human beings to close their minds is actually really quite a real thing. And so, there's lots of pressures that help you kind of close minds, etc. And that the challenge we have as human beings is that we need to retain open mind, to keep learning, and to keep being better people, and making the world a better place.
Brilliant. Great to hear. And in terms of sport, tell us a bit about your personal journey with sport, but also why you think sport is such a powerful vehicle and tool to use with young people and to help with social outcomes as well.
So I've been involved with sport pretty much as early a childhood as I can remember. So, from being 9 and 10 years old, as a family, I've got a younger sister. Me, my sister, and my mum and dad, we used to go for a run. We used to live in London, and we'd have a family run, and that was it. We did that as a family, and my dad, did karate. One of 4 brothers. They all did karate to various levels, and karate's been a big part of, or big constant through the whole of my life. I've done other sports, so as a general principle, what was instilled in me was that it's not just enough to keep using your brain. You've got to look after your body too. There's a longevity piece, and all the health benefits that kind of come with it. And so keeping fit was always high in the agenda, and habits form out of people following people they respect, etc. And so that just became a norm for me, and my children are pretty much been in the same sort of mould, really. So sport for young people, provides any number of things. Discipline, camaraderie as part of a team, a regiment, structure, and all of the associated well-being factors that sport comes to.
Yeah, great. And that's obviously something that massively resonates with how we deliver and why we use sport. Yes, it's about physical health, mental health, and well-being, but also using sport to drive through key life skills. So kind of using a sports session and a drill to drive through lessons in teamwork, communication, respect, things like that. But obviously as a Spurs fan as well, you've obviously had some heartache lessons through sport, just as I have as a West Brom fan, so I know how you feel there.
Yes, that's it's almost bordering on a tragedy.
Yeah, we'll move on quickly then from that. And obviously sat here today now, you are the new chair of trustees at Sport for Life, effective from the 1st of April, taking over from Hitesh, who was with us for quite a long time. You've had one meeting as the chair of Sport for Life, and tell us just a bit more about, from your perspective, what the key roles and responsibilities are as a chair.
So as a chair, it's so it's a very responsible position, but equally, the chair is just another trustee in many respects. But the job of the chair is to actually chair the board meetings, and to make sure that they run according to how they should, etc. And there is a certain format that needs to be followed as well. We are a charity, and there's certain requirements that the Charities Commission require us to make sure that we follow a certain a level of governance. There is a responsibility to hold those around the table to account, and to make sure that we kind of work effectively. So everybody around the table, that means you, Tom, as the CEO, the senior leadership team, and the other trustees as well. And those meetings, will have and should have a blend of governance, and that's perhaps slightly different to running perhaps a commercial organisation, for example. Respecting the framework that the Charities Commission kind of lays out. We need to make sure we're not falling foul of any of that. Otherwise, all the work that we do is pointless. So we've got a huge responsibility with that. But equally, then to balance that with strategy and strategy implementation, and ensure that the leadership team is actually delivering the strategy and is being held to account for the outcomes of delivering that strategy. The trustees are non-executive, and therefore they are not involved in the business on a day-to-day basis. They interact with as part of the board. I won't say quite on an ad hoc basis, but it's not every day. Is the distinction I'm trying to make here. And as part of those roles, we, chair and trustees, we have a responsibility to make sure that not only is the strategy being carried out, but actually that the charity is remaining true to its purpose. And that's a really, really important part. And therefore, we want, as chair and as trustees, we want to make sure that those resources that are available to yourself and the team are actually being utilised for the purposes that we set out to utilise them for.
Yeah. Brilliant. And in addition to those really important duties around governance and strategy, how would you say you can provide additional added value, whether that's engaging the wider community or donors or partners? Kind of what else can you, as chair and as a trustee, do in addition to those things?
In my personal opinion, to be involved with the kind of work that Sport for Life do, or any other charity, and there's lots of charities do some amazing work. There's got to be an element of passion. Yeah. So if you think that you're sitting there to tick a box and think, well, I've kind of done my job, you're kind of in the wrong seat. Because then how can you truly engage with a wider audience and say, well, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing, this is what help we need, So that, ability to speak passionately about what you do and having the charity work at the forefront of your mind is highly important. So, working with the various groups, we have, the likes of donors, for example, people who financially contribute to the organisation. The message, I suppose, is true for every single stakeholder. We've got partners, people who help us deliver. Our message in terms of deploying some of the programs that we run, etc. And not last but not least, certainly the young people as well. And that whole ability to talk about the vision, where we're trying to do, and the help that we're trying to give to young people. That's the most important part, really, in spreading the message. But the other, I suppose, the ally to that, as a chair and trustees. We all have a much wider network. We come to Sport for Life and help it achieve its purpose, but actually we've all got day jobs. But that doesn't mean that we should just forget that actually we haven't got a board meeting for a couple of months, so I can forget about Sport for Life for a bit. The point is that in our day-to-day life, we need to be thinking about what can we be doing, what of our normal activities would help benefit, the work that we do for Sport for Life, and that's how we kind of sort of spread the message.
And what, in your perspective, would you say makes Sport for Life unique in its approach?
So I've touched on some of those, kind of already, but there's a really unique combination in terms of, the use of sport and coupling that with young people and employment. But I think some of the unique characteristics that it has is ambition to grow. So that whole kind of restlessness is a perfect example of exactly what charity should be doing. What we've got today is not enough. There's always going to be more tomorrow when we achieve what we achieve. We want more still. It's like your work is never finished. And then the other part is there's a really, really strong underlying risk framework and governance, which is essential for any charity. But and I've only got some experience of other charities. This is a particularly well run charity. It's professional. It's got really strong values. The combination of those 4 or 5 things really does make this is an absolute standout piece. And I talk to people in and around, sort of Birmingham, the Midlands, and talk about sport. Oh, yeah, sport. Yeah, I've heard of Sport for Life yet. They might not be able to articulate what it does. The fact that they've heard of it kind of says to me that the message is absolutely starting to get out there far and wide.
Yeah, great. And it's great to hear how these things align so closely to our values. So we talk about growth, and for me, that's so linked to our progressive value. You talked about a relentless focus on developing and growing and improving what we do. And that is all through that progressive value. And I suppose to give a bit of context to that, for anyone listening, we've gone from 0 staff when we started in 2006-07 to almost 30 full-time staff now. We're a regional charity operating across the West Midlands, but we're now looking to expand nationally, which is a great milestone. We're just under 2 million revenue, so real key growth in certain metrics. But coming back to the values again, what's so important there is that it's not driven by the vanity of those figures. It's driven by another value, changing lives. So it's driven by that value and that desire to work with more young people to change more young people's lives. But yeah, it's just great to hear that it's comes back to values again.
Yeah, and that's for any organisation, I say that with in commerce or the third sector, understanding your values and then remaining true to those values is so important. You set the right tone, the right culture within the organisation. People know what they're coming to work for, and then they carry out their work with purpose, with those values in mind, and they just need constant reinforcement. That's just the best way to do things.
Great. And from your perspective, if someone wants to get involved in our work or wants to support us, how are the key ways in which they can do that?
So predominantly sort of donors and partners, I would kind of reach out to. We talked about being front of mind, and that is highly important. So we have a responsibility to spread the message. That's trustees, employees, everybody who's involved with this passionately. Again, I use that word in order to ensure that those donors and partners have Sport for Life at front of mind. Those people can then work directly with us through be involved in some of our programs or kind of mentoring young people, or providing some sort of financial donations, so we can use that money to change people's lives. So there's any number of ways in which we can reach the young people that we need to help with the help of our donors and partners. And I think, those partners that want to get involved with us, we would kind of welcome the opportunity to provide some of the help, experience and instruction that we've got at Sport for Life in order to basically have a set of tentacles that start to expand across the UK, so that more and more people, because there's only so much that we can physically do here in Birmingham, but it's a waste if that message doesn't get further than the borders of this city,
Yeah. Great. And just moving now on to thinking about the sector in which we operate, sport for development. Obviously, we have a few different hats. We have our youth hat because we are all about young people. We have our West Midlands hat because that's the region in which we operate. But also we deliver and operate and are part of this sport for development sector. So that sector of organisations who are using sport as a vehicle to support young people, or to support anyone really, towards better futures and to achieve key tangible outcomes using sport. Obviously, you're quite new to that sector.
Yeah.
So what do you see as the main challenges facing the sport for development sector today? And how do you think Sport for Life is well placed to address some of those?
So one of the things I think is important, and coincidentally Sport for Life does well, is remaining relevant to its audience. The ability to engage with young people. It's not just enough to say, hey guys, we've got a sporting program, do you want to come and join us, kind of thing. The way in which young people need to be understood and addressed and encouraged, remaining relevant to your audience is super critical. In terms then, if you look at then, how do we kind of bring some of these various stakeholders together, and if you're talking about securing investment, for example, there's much more work that we need to do around, bringing, I want to say education. I mean, there's going to be people who aren't aware of, the connection between sport, young people in employment. Politicians could be an example of a group of people, and helping them to understand the changes that they could possibly make and what they can lobby for, because of the consequential effects of organisations like Sport for Life not existing, and the effects on crime, mental health, and stress, employment, and just the general well-being of the UK nation, which politicians as a group again do have a responsibility for. We all do, but as a government. And so, that's kind of bringing those sort of facets together and helping people understand it isn't just a tick box. There really is a much wider connection across a web of things that kind of come as a consequence of this work,
And that links really closely to some work we're doing as part of the Sport for Development Coalition. So they have a campaign called Open Goal, and we really want to add our voice to that, to lobby government, those in decision-making powers, to really believe in the power of sport to tackle a lot of society's issues. So yes, it's physical health, that's obviously the most obvious one, but we know sport can be used to tackle mental health and well-being, huge issues with young people in that at the moment, like you said, crime and antisocial behaviour. And we know through a lot of evidence, internally and externally, that the social return on investment is huge with that. So it's recognising that sport is a powerful tool to tackle some of these big issues. And what we find in Sport for Life as well is we will have young people who initially they're not interested in sport, but actually that's okay. And sometimes the perception is always, if I can't play in a five-a-side team on an AstroTurf, then sport's not for me. But actually, we want to see physical activity quite broad. It can be just go for a walk. We'll take a young person to the gym for a session, and even those little things can raise the mood, improve their well-being, put them in a place that's more conducive with learning. Would you agree with that kind of assertion?
you know, there's any number of scientific studies that prove, you know, around endorphins being released, you know, sort of post exercise. There's, you know, growing, you know, health concerns right across the UK in terms of, you know, obesity and major diseases, you know, etc. And that, as a human race, generally speaking, we've become to lead more sedentary lives. You know, the growth of, you know, sort of office jobs, for example, or in the tech sector, etc. Whereas, you know, perhaps previous generations, you know, those industries didn't exist, and, you know, there was much more industry, and people were more active as a consequence of not having conveniences that we live our lives. So, you know, there's a whole host of things that kind of come together with, you know, the work that's been done here, you know.
Obviously, if we put one of our other hats on now, away from sport for development, we're obviously all about young people. And our core focus, as you know, is employability, but we know how that's inextricably linked with so many other key challenges young people face. Given our focus is young people, and we work with 11 to 29-year-olds, and we're so passionate about that, why do you think young people are so important?
So, well, the most obvious thing is, you know, young people are the future. Right? So, you know, they're the people that are going to carry, you know, the human race forward, and, you know, we owe them really an opportunity to be the best version of themselves, I think. And many people, you know, young people don't realise, you know, perhaps the level of skill that they have and what they have to offer, you know, people. And the pandemic would have completely thrown out, you know, some of, you know, the natural development and progression that young people would have had. And as a consequence, there's a real risk. And I'm pretty sure there's a survey which kind of young people which says they feel that they've been left behind, you know, as a consequence. They would have been, you know, I know there's many victims of the pandemic in different ways, but, you know, you could label them a victim as well. They were, you know, the people that were probably the most effective as a subgroup, you know, in terms of affecting their future and their future generations, etc. So I think, you know, in terms of redressing the balance, you know, young people are vitally important. It's not when people like me, you know, as I'm getting to the end of my career, you know, that's going to make the difference. You know, what we need to do as the elders, so to speak, is to pave the way for the young people. And, you know, I know from experience that entering life as such, you know, if you're a 16-year-old, for example, it just can be confusing, you know. And so for a young person to have support and experience, you know, the experience that we have being shared with those young people, they're the kind of things that we need to be doing. And that's why young people are young people are important. The combination of young people with people more experienced is doubly important.
And young people growing up today, what are the different challenges and pressures that you think they face compared to when you were growing up? I'm not suggesting you're not young anymore.
No, I'm not young anymore. This is a fact, I'm afraid.
But to say, when you were 16 and the world is a big and scary place versus a 16-year-old now, how is it different, do you think?
So I think technology is a massive factor in this, and that brings about its own level of opportunities, but threats also, you know, in terms of how to harness the power of technology, etc. So I'll share a story as to how old I am, right? When I started my first graduate job, I was taken into an office. It was in London, and I was given a desk in an office, which I thought was amazing all by itself. I had a phone. I was starting to get really, really impressed. But more importantly, I had my own PC. I mean, so right now you can't imagine turning up to a job with no technology, right? So that just kind of shows you, I mean, in a really short space of time, how things have changed. And so, as a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old, etc., when I was, around that time, you kind of try to cling on to as much information as you possibly could. And information was quite scarce because the technology wasn't there, you couldn't access it that easily. Trying to find the right people to help you was quite difficult. Whereas now, there's a lot of information, but equally it's just as hard because there's so much information. The confusion that can be caused, for a younger person entering life now is just very, very difficult, I think. And so what happens is if people get lost in the myriad of information and confusion, ultimately it's going to affect sort of UK productivity and all the things that we've talked about, mental health challenges, feelings of apathy, etc., could start to pervade certain individuals, etc. And so I think, that whole piece around helping young people into the world of work, enter life, we have a responsibility to do that.
And just a follow-up question on that before we look at youth unemployment is, what do you feel the key challenges are for disadvantaged young people compared to, say, more affluent peers? And just to give a bit of context to that, obviously, that is where a great deal of our focus goes, on those young people that need that support more. So by the time disadvantaged young people reach school, they're already behind their more affluent peers and significantly more likely to leave without a good qualification. Disadvantaged pupils on average 18 months behind the rest of the class in academic achievement by aged 16. 60% of young people from disadvantaged backgrounds don't have a level 2 qualification by age 19, and that's compared to 30% of their better off peers. I suppose I've given some of the evidence there, but what do you feel the key challenges are for disadvantaged young people?
For me, it's got to be a sense of belonging, and whether barriers are real or artificial, they kind of need to disappear. And so that to me requires a really open-mindedness of thinking, and that's incumbent upon everybody. So if you happen to belong to the group that is considered affluent as per the definition of these studies, is to kind of embrace and think about what you can do to share and help other people. Use the privilege, if you can use that word, that you have to broaden your spectrum, and to not have that closeted life, and recognise that there are millions of people that are way, way less fortunate than you, and to give back. I can't emphasise that enough, that all of us could do more than what we're doing, and it just comes from having a mindset to want to help other people,
So youth unemployment and employability, the key areas that Sport for Life focus on, why do you think that is such a vital cause for us to work on?
So if we look at, youth or young people, in a post-pandemic world, they're claiming more benefit than they were, sort of pre-pandemic. It's a national issue. The government specifically highlighted post-pandemic young people as the key focus group, as also being the worst affected from an employment perspective, and they've had a go at a couple of programs that they wanted to implement, Kickstart being one, for example. So it just goes to show that and normally people criticise governments for being too slow to react to real problems that people face. They've the fact that it's on their radar and that programs were implemented pretty much underlines the fact that actually it's a key part of a UK-wide issue that needs resolving. And there's plenty of good work goes on around the UK in this regard.
Yeah, great. And similar to the last question, just a few stats and insights to bring that to life. So young people without a level 2 qualification are twice as likely to be long-term NEET than their peers. 75% of young people who are NEET for 3 months have been NEET for 12 months. That's quite a startling stat for us. So if they, I think that's an impetus stat from some of their research, but if they go past that initial 3-month period, the likelihood is that they're going to be NEET for the long term. Yeah. And I think that just really highlights how important it is that we try and tackle this early and give that support to young people, even in the early stages of them being unemployed. And another startling stat, long periods of unemployment make young people 8 times more likely to be NEET again. So if they're in that cycle, it can become quite difficult to break out of. Yeah. And so I suppose further evidence is the need for the kind of work that we're doing.
Without a doubt. And, I think the key thing here really is the fact that, if we go back to Sport for Life and one of the values that it has, which is that relentless focus on change and continuing to drive more and more, through its programs and reaching more and more young people. I can't emphasise enough that is one of the best values you can have in terms of tackling and trying to minimise some of the effects of these statistics.
And in terms of any advice you would give to young people today when it comes to plan for their future, you've been a young person yourself in the job market, you've had various roles, you employ young people. What advice would you give to them?
So I would say that the world is a competitive place, and it doesn't mean you've got to race everybody, but there is a requirement to survive through life. Yeah, so just the basics, heating, lighting, warmth, roof over your head, etc., etc. I think it might feel perhaps a little bit casual when you're a teenager, because they're not real things that you probably need to worry about, and I'll just kind of deal with them, sort of as and when they arise, which is one way of looking at it. So it really just depends on how far you want to sort of get ahead, and you have a choice, I think, around whether you want to stumble into life, should we call it, or whether you want to have an active arrival. And I would say to young people is to start thinking about these things early. Think about the future, visualise where you might want to be, what that kind of looks like, and sort of work backwards a little bit and say, okay, what steps do I need to take? Do I need to undertake a particular educational route? Do I need certain qualifications for that vocation, or do I need to consider an apprenticeship? Do I want to learn a skill or a trade? There was a period, maybe there still is, I don't know, but certainly, where the only way to get ahead was university. I'm not a believer in that. Some people are just not cut out for university. That's just not their bag, but that doesn't mean that society should look down on them just because they haven't been to university. There's plenty of routes. The key thing is about making the best of yourself, and that is about as much as you could ask of young people. So I would say, get the advice. The funny thing is that a 40-year-old, for example, would be, I don't know, maybe a 16-year-old would think, well, that's a really old person, When you get to 40, you still feel really, really young. And, so the engagement that needs to be encouraged, and the link between, you know, a young person and somebody with more experience. This is where we talk about that knowledge sharing, yeah. So we absolutely need to be giving that knowledge to the younger people, because actually those 40-year-olds or 50-year-olds, etc., or 30-year-olds, they've kind of been through, you know, a chunk of that journey, and to give people the awareness that actually this is what's coming up, and so therefore to the 16-year-old in this case, you know, think actively about what you might want to do with your life. Don't need to make any concrete plans, it don't have to be that rigid, but just have a thought process and to start that early, you know, because the world is quite a competitive place.
Yeah. Great advice. And for a young person that's potentially struggling even more and they feel they can't catch a break, they've maybe been out of work for a while, mental health challenges, we know the challenge they're facing post-pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, we had Mental Health Awareness Day yesterday. We talked quite a lot about anxiety and how that's on the rise. If someone was just really struggling and they feel they can't catch a break, what kind of advice would you give to them?
So I think with a lot, and the reason, you know, that there is such a focus on mental health is because actually what happens is, and I use this word in inverted commas, people suffer alone, yeah, and that the suffering, it just becomes a downward spiral, yeah. So all those things that you mentioned, can't catch a break, you know, don't know how to get myself out of this, and etc. Really, the key thing to break the cycle is to ask for help. There is no stigma, you know. What could be better than, you know, for somebody to be able to give that person the help, the break that they need, or the guidance, or the advice, etc. That just one little nugget of information that just sets them on the right track, helps break that cycle and just get them on their way, you know. So yeah, definitely asking for advice is the biggest thing, without worrying about the stigma that people might think is associated with asking for help. I've asked for help for the whole of my career, you know, and I still ask for help now because I still haven't got all the answers for all the things that I need to do.
And this is something we spoke about yesterday, actually, through some of our socials, but it's a message we try to get to young people, is that asking for help is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. Totally. And that's that stigma you're talking about.
Yeah, totally right.
And we also spoke yesterday about trying to be patient sometimes with it. You know, when you're in that situation, you feel like you can't avail yourself from it, and your thoughts might become more negative, but it's that realization that thoughts are ephemeral, they come and go, and it doesn't need to define you. It's not who you are, and ultimately, hopefully, it will pass, and so just have that patience that hopefully better times are coming. And you talked about helping hand. That's what we want to be at Sport for Life. So, you know, if there is a young person there, they are struggling, our mentors are there to help them. And it can be real baby steps, like you said, towards that progression.
I'll give you a little story from the early part of my career. Thankfully, I was doing quite well in the first 5, 6, 7 years, etc. And somebody older than me gave me a bit of advice. And they said that if you end up progressing too quickly, you'll end up in a job that actually you can't deliver, and then that becomes really, really uncomfortable. And then eventually end up taking a step back if you kind of pursue that path. And so here I am, I won't say how many years later, still remembering that piece of advice, because I can still picture it. I can remember the person, I remember his name, etc. I remember exactly where we were. And maybe, I don't know, a year or so later, I was offered a promotion, and I would have been really young to have that promotion and be in that position, way, way younger than a lot of my peers, and I declined it because for that piece of advice, and I took a different job, which was a sideways move rather than an upwards move, in order to just get more experience at that particular level. And I did 2 or 3 jobs at that level before I then moved on and took that promotion. And, you know, taking that advice actually was one of the best things I ever did, really.
And looking back, and again, this can link into advice for young people, tell me about mistakes you made. Did you make mistakes? What's your approach to failure? What's that going to be like for young people entering the workplace?
Just to accept that actually failure is a normal part of life, and there is nothing wrong with failure. I think everybody feels, you know, and perhaps more so now in the world of, you know, kind of Instagram and social media, that anything short of perfection is, you know, you've just done a really, really bad job, which is just not true, you know. And I have failed. You know, I did you know, have jobs where actually I didn't quite have the right level of experience, and it never worked, and I regret it. I learned from it, and you know what, I moved on. And you know, as I've gone through my career, I've looked back and I thought, okay, well, what did I do wrong there, or what could I have done better? Let's not make the same mistake, you know. So try and change things in the way you approach stuff. But did I ever look back and think it was an absolute catastrophic disaster? No, because, you know, actually if you develop a bit of a survival instinct, you say, okay, well, I will just modify my behaviour and I will do things differently next time, you know. And that's kind of pretty much what I've done. So I'd say, from an advice point of view, is to look at every single thing which has gone wrong as a learning opportunity. That sounds a bit cliche, but it is so true.
It's right what you say about social media. You know, you have this Instagrammable, curated perfection that people compare themselves against to.
Yeah.
They compare where they are to these veneers that they see from their friends, and that's not reality, because behind that we know it's messy. That's not reality.
Absolutely.
And I'd completely concur with that, is in that failure can be seen as part of life. And I think your culture around failure is really important. If you see it as a lesson to help you improve and develop, that's far better than seeing it as a kind of binary, or, well, I failed, that's it. It's a reflection on me. I mean, I know you've got kids, I've got kids. That is how they learn.
Yeah.
They have to make mistakes. They have to fall down. They have to get up.
Yeah.
They make mistakes in friendships, at home, at school, all the time. But actually that's okay, because that's how we learn.
Yeah.
And I think, we've got to be careful not to, I don't want people to fail, of course, at Sport for Life, and obviously failing at the same thing over and over again is an issue.
Yeah.
However, it's how we learn, and feedback's part of that as well. And I'd agree with you. When I look back over the 16, now in our 17th year at Sport for Life, have I got things wrong? Yes.
Yeah.
Have I made mistakes? Yes, all the time. But it's just that relentless value to try and keep learning from that, try not to make the same mistake twice, and keep seeing it as a learning curve.
Do you know, to fail is just human. Yeah, we're just not built to be perfect. And those people who say they've never failed, I would challenge them wholeheartedly. You know, the exceptional people learn from it and better themselves as a consequence, and that's evolution.
Great. So we've looked a lot at Sport for Life, your new role here, the organisation, the sectors we work in, but kind of been looking back a little bit. I think it'd be great, and again, this is aligned to our values, because it's all about how we can improve and develop, and that kind of unattainable journey to something that we know we'll never reach, but it's always the pursuit of that. What excites you about our future?
I'll come back to the constant, which is the values of, you know, Sport for Life. You know, this is an organisation that does one thing really, and it helps young people use this sport and get into education or employment. That's it. You know, we haven't started to branch out into, you know, a different age group or demographic or anything like that. It has absolutely stayed true to its purpose. So that part absolutely excites me. And the fact that having done that, it's got a strong track record of delivery under your stewardship, Tom. That part excites me because it gives me the confidence to know that actually, this is, we don't work here full time. This place will always be in good hands, and so that strong track record of delivery excites me for the future and what we can do, and that relentless focus on young people and sport employment is just so important. So that whole combination, I wouldn't want to see it change really personally, and so I can buy into that, and I want to be a part of it, and be part of that growth story, just because it's just such a worthwhile way to go and tackle what is a key problem for the UK.
Yeah, great. And you talk about growth. How do you hope to see the organ? Yeah, great. And you talk about growth. How do you hope to see the organisation grow and develop in the next 3 to 6 years when you'll be part of that journey?
So I think there's an opportunity for us to start looking at the organisation more commercially. And I don't mean we need to make loads of profit. That said, the profitability enables us to have more resources to help more people. So I think in terms of having a commercial outlook is absolutely the right thing to do. Because if we can help more people, then we're closer to the end, which we'll never arrive at, of course. So looking at the commercial aspects is really, really important. And then to do that, there's a lot of focus on the key skills that we need around the board. And so developing the board and equally as an organisation grows, you need more people and more skills, not ad infinitum, but you stay constant to the needs of the organisation and recruit the right level of skill onto that board to enable that journey. We're a group of people that have a set of skills, but recognising we may not have everything that we need right now. And even if we do, that doesn't necessarily mean we've got everything that we need for tomorrow. So developing the board is a really important part of all of that. And then we've still got the responsibility to spread our message, but just making sure that we absolutely have that hunger and that ambition to. It's not growth for growth's sake. Growth means that we're helping more people. So growth absolutely has to be high on that agenda, and it's the means in which we get there, and that can be subject to a bit of debate, but without a doubt, it's those things that are really important for the next stage of our journey.
Yeah, great. And I suppose a bit of context for any listeners in terms of our growth. As you know, we're taking a little bit of a different direction here. So historically, for the last 16 or so years, we've been a direct delivery organisation. So it's Sport for Life staff delivering Sport for Life services and activities to Sport for Life's young people. And that has been amazing, and that's been an integral part of that incredible 16-year journey that we've been on. And it's meant that we've controlled it quite nicely, and it's our model that we're delivering. But actually now, as we're going into new areas and starting to grow geographically, and especially outside the West Midlands, we're doing that much more in partnership with other organisations in the sport for development sector, as opposed to doing it ourselves. And the reason for that is we don't need to go into a new area and parachute in and tread on others' toes where we have no track record and where there are other organisations using sport and engaging young people in a really effective way. So we feel the more efficient and effective way for us to reach more young people is through those partners, and to support and empower and develop them to be a bigger organisation, a better organisation, improve their impact, add what value we can from our 16 years of knowledge and experience. Not that we know it all by any stretch, but that's an exciting new approach and model. Yeah. And what excites you about that new approach?
Just there's a couple of things that really stand out for me in terms of this new delivery model. One is there's a recognition that you can't go it alone. Yeah, there's only so much physical resource that is available to anybody, any organisation, and Sport for Life is no exception, in terms of what it can deliver. So, unless you're prepared to operate, Sport for Life branches and franchises and stuff, it just creates a different, sort of complexion on things. So the open-mindedness and saying, there isn't a requirement to go it alone, and I'm a big believer of that, is a really fundamental. It's an attitude, really, and there is good work that is being done here, and the message should be spread, far and wide. And really, what we're doing here at Sport for Life by using that type of model is not saying, right, we're going to come and do this. It's actually saying we will help you. What can we share with you to help your own journey? And the thing about really, really important thing about the third sector is that it shouldn't be competitive. You shouldn't, or no charity should be like trying to like you said, parachute into another geography in the UK in order to encourage people away from one program or piece of work that's being done by a charitable organisation into another. There's nothing to be gained out of that. And so the whole approach around weaving a web of connectivity and collaboration is absolutely the right way to do this, because there's only one winner at the end of it. There should only be one winner at the end of this, and in this case it should be the young people that are trying to get the help.